Well, it is 9 o'clock and I fulfill my promises, right? I do what I say I'm going to do. So we're going to start this Impact Collaborative. Thank you, Yvonne. We'll throw you back into the audience. Thank you for all you do. Yvonne spoke, I think, the 2 Impact Collaboratives ago. So as I promised you all speakers today, many of the amazing people who are joining us here in the Central Plaza, which is the Impact Collaborative, they come from very, very many different walks. It might be a parent, it might be a survivor champion leader, it may be somebody who's spoken on this Impact Collaborative recently, and it might be somebody new to us. But we're all together in this plaza together. We ask you who are not on camera to please be very active in the chat. Liz Regalado, one of our county's amazing leaders, has already posted some of her information. We invite you all to do the same. We welcome the people from DIG are here. Yeah, this is a really powerful, powerful group. Tish Mindingal, welcome, amazing, lots of incredible folks. So let's start. It's a powerful beginning to 2022 and nothing more powerful than this incredible board of directors, of which Yvonne Mesa is one, and many other of our board members will be joining us. This powerhouse board is thrilled to share with you all that the history, the 3 decades history of the Women's Fund, of your Women's Fund, is doing a full circle. We have returned to transformative grant making. Many of you know the Women's Fund most recently for our incredible Stop Sex Trafficking campaign of the Miami Super Bowl Host Committee or our Freedom from Violence Coalition meetings. This is a return since 2016 to grants. We gave the first grant ever to the Lotus House. First grant that Leap for Ladies, and Leap for Ladies is with us today as well, ever received was from your Women's Fund. Casa Valentina, first grant and fiscal agent, this Women's Fund. FAM, the Haitian organization, guess what? First grant from us, same thing with Urgent Inc. This town would not be this town without this organization, which is your organization. So we've returned to transformative grant making. That RFP is on our website. The due date is January 15th. We encourage you, please, if you're not applying, to share. Go on the website. It's very clean. It's very clear. We're looking for creativity from problem solvers within our community, right? So please do join us there. All right, onwards, Viv. Special thanks to all of our amazing board members. Yes, but we also have elected officials. We have folks here from our state attorney, Catherine Fernandez Rundle's office, amazing leader. Thank you so much for being here. We have people from the FBI. We have Judge Carol Kelly, the head of the domestic violence courts, here with us. Thank you all so much for being here. Direct service providers, multitudinous. Folks are joining us today. Some people are still logging on, but we have an RSVP list of powerhouse direct service providers. And we always have to thank our amazing 87-year-old founder, Marilyn Gladstone, for dreaming the dream and then making it happen, because people like Marilyn and people like each and every one of you are the people who show up. Right, Malia? Malia's in the audience too. Okay, onwards, Viv. We can't do this without fuel. We cannot do this without fuel. And it's really important to have powerful sponsorships. And the Carlo and Nicole Scaola Foundation and that family has been steadfast in their support of this organization for many years. And 1 Billion Rising is empowering this whole series. We also thank Norma Jean Abraham, who is the incredible engine behind the sponsorship of the Anthony R. Abraham Foundation of our Freedom from Violence pillar. Thank you, Norma Jean. I went to my first Women's Fund activity some 20-some years ago, and the Lots Beach Villanos invited me to their table at this thing called Power of the Purse. Who knew? I walked into Parrot Jungle and it buzzed with my tribe. I didn't know most of these people. I had an international job, but all of a sudden I knew that Miami had the people that we're feeling the same thing that I was feeling, and we're not afraid to put on the gender lens. We're planning to meet in person. We just, we've been Omicroned, all of us, for several of our live activities. In fact, one of our panelists was Omicron today. We'll mention that in a minute. And our Raise the Bar was Omicroned for the legal community. The Power of the Purse, we think we're going to be all right. So we plan to meet in person, 3 decades of women's fun history. Please do sign up as sponsors. Please join us. Coming together is when the magic happens. April 8th. And onward we go, Viv, to you, Viviana. As proud as we are of our return to transformative grant making, we are equally proud of the new iteration of our research arm and the dashboard on the status of women and girls, which was launched this year. Our senior research associate, Viviana Alvarado Pacheco, is here to tell you all about it.
Good morning, everybody. So as we all know, data is extremely important. So I'm going to give you a little synopsis of what we have shown on our dashboard. Based on the data collected from Florida health charts, as well as the county information, we know that domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking cases are likely underreported. So these are just estimates of what we know to be true. There was a significant decrease in domestic violence rates, 29% from 2010 to 2019. The rate of forcible sex offenses increased by 12% from 2010 to 2019. And the number of human trafficking reports more than doubled over the last decade. These are extremely important facts to know, and we're happy to share them on our dashboard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Viviana. As you know, many of you know, this is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and we thank you all so much for your ongoing work, collaborative work. We cannot do it without individuals in the community, in addition to the direct service providers. Gami is going to post in the chat here how we can go to the service, to the tools that we have on our website. And we're going to go into this Impact Collaborative knowing that many of our colleagues are focusing on a lot of the data and a lot of the information about human trafficking. So we're doing this Impact Collaborative a little bit differently. We're taking this theme to talk about some aspects of human trafficking and all kinds of trauma that we don't necessarily always think about. And to focus us, for that, we are going to ask Dr. Dries to join us. Dr. Dries is an amazing teaching
find out
professor.
why I cannot hear.
Jenny, are you able to hear us now?
I cannot hear anything suddenly.
Okie doke.
Okay, I hear now.
There we go. So
Okay,
Dr.
thank
Jenny
you.
Dries, who's not only an amazing clinician and a direct service provider and a retired teaching professor, but she also has specialized and dedicated much of her life to working with older populations. So she has seen people come from young to an advanced age. So there's a very special medical perspective. And we welcome you, Dr. Dries. Thrilled to have you with us. Take it away.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. Well, when I was asked to come and give the address, I felt that it was a very special moment in my life as I had to take early retirement for health reasons, for medical reasons. So I'm going to say the following. Good morning to all. And I want you to know that it's truly, truly an honor to be with you today to speak about a topic that has always been important to me, but that now is really a centerpiece in my life. We will look today at the impact of a chronic stress and trauma on our health and its association with chronic illnesses. May we have the first slide as a background, please? So I am a firm believer, indeed, that we are shaped by our everyday experiences. Some experiences are indeed joyful and make our life so fulfilling and worthy of the many sacrifices and hard work. Some experiences are at times uncomfortable components of our daily routine, yet we welcome them as they stimulate and motivate us to fully unleash our God-given potential. They sharpen our minds, they keep us focused, and they maintain our competitive edge. Some experiences are painful and traumatic. They often leave us broken and hopeless. We experience stress every day under one form or the other. We internalize the effects of stress at the emotional, the mental, and the physical level. The impact can be immediate and short-lived, and sometimes it is lasting and defining of who we are. So the question is what to do about it. We'll go to the next slide, please. As we know, stress is defined as any type of change that causes physical, emotional, and psychological tension. It helps us adapt rapidly to an environment by triggering the body's response to perceived danger. It is the basis for the fight, flight, or freeze concept. When the threat is gone, though, the system returns to normal by initiating the relaxation response. Not all stress is harmful. When stress is acute and short-lived, it can be beneficial as it helps us complete tasks in a timely fashion. Stress can be chronic, though, and it appears never ending, as in our taxing jobs. It can be episodic and recurrent and become a way of living. It affects mind and body at the physiological level. And often one develops anxious moods, physical symptoms such as palpitation or headache. And left unchecked and unbalanced, stress can set the stage for chronic illness, for which we may or may not be predisposed genetically. We'll go to the next slide. Trauma. Trauma is defined as a heightened stress response to an incident or a series of events that is emotionally disturbing and life-threatening. Examples of trauma, as we know, include intimate partner violence, childhood neglect, exposure to community violence, and sudden unexplained loss of a loved one. Trauma also affects mind and body at the physiological level and varies in intensity and severity, depending on the time of onset, the length of exposure, and the circumstances. We'll go to the next slide, please. We all know that it is a spectrum of an experience which affects all of us. Chronic stress and trauma therefore impact our body by activating the central stress response system, which produces the stress hormones such as cortisol and norepinephrine. The repeated or continuous production of these stress hormones can severely wear and tear our body and mind, and indeed lay the groundwork for chronic illnesses, such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, depression, chronic autoimmune disease, and cancer. We live in a world where stress appears to be prevalent. We therefore wonder whether or not we will ever be able to avoid this seemingly inexorable assault on our body and mind. How do we therefore mitigate the impact of traumatic stress? The next slide will show us some of the possible mitigating factors in terms of lessening this impact. And I don't speak from the perspective of an expert. I think a lot of you are so much more an expert in the matter than I am. But in the reading that I've been doing recently, I've gathered a few of these recommendations, which I'd like to share with you and which I practice every day. 1, acknowledge the effect of stress in your life and seek professional help early, which I did not. 2, know that you don't have to be alone and build a support network. Can be a family member, a good friend. And this is the best part. Love and be good to thyself. You deserve it and you're worth it. My new motto, I am worth it. I am so worth it. Next, be your best advocate. Trauma is real. Stress is real. You are not imagining it. The symptoms you're experiencing are real. Practitioners out there, if you are in the audience, we recognize that we need a trauma-informed approach to care, which is not centered to our practice, unfortunately. And this is where I hope that we can make a difference in the very near future. Practice mindfulness meditation to activate your relaxation response. This will reduce your stress hormone level and dampen the adrenaline surge. Modify and adjust your lifestyle with regular exercise, healthy eating habits, good sleep hygiene. Create time for yourself and unapologetically engage in me time. You've earned it. To those who know chronic stress or trauma, I say that the journey is long and arduous, but it is one that we are determined to embark on. Let's make it a journey of hope, of self-discovery, and of self-love. And we'll go to, we are at the 6th slide, which Maya Angelou says well. And as soon as healing happens, go out and heal somebody else. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about something that has been front and center in my life as of recently. This is the first time I speak about it, and I thank the audience for its attention and patience. Thank you.
We learn from one another, from wisdom, and we thank you for your generosity and sharing your experience. And we wish you good health, and we wish you will join us. You can go on mute now, but we're going to ask you to join us later for the Q&A, Dr. Dreiss, so please don't go away.
Of course.
So how does this Impact Collaborative work? This is interactive. This is your Impact Collaborative. Please participate in the polls. It really helps. We have some brilliant board members who are helping us to figure out how to measure things and how to show things. It's not just in the dashboard, it's also in how we participate together. So please, please do. Now, you'll have an exit survey at the end. Please participate in that as well. Post your questions in the Q&A or throw in the chat. We'll find them and I'll get to those and share them with the panelists at the end. So let's go forward. We're going to ask the impossible of the 4 brilliant panelists who are with us today to introduce themselves in 2 minutes or less. What does that mean? They're going to tell you why they're here today. And so they're going to introduce themselves in context. So you don't have to listen to me too long. And we're going to ask Millie Maldonado to take it away. Millie.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And wow, what a great introduction. Just giving information about trauma and the effects, how trauma affects us psychologically, mentally. So my name is Millie, and I'm the Executive Director of the Trauma Resolution Center. The Trauma Resolution Center has been part of our community in Miami-Dade for the past 26 years. We provide trauma-informed therapy and psychoeducational groups to individuals who have experienced trauma. Our motto is the trauma-informed motto, which is that we don't judge individuals. Something happened to you, and that's the reason why you're experiencing the symptoms. There's nothing wrong with you. We are located in Miami-Dade, here in Coral Gables. We're a nonprofit. We provide services to our community. So I hope I met the 2 minutes.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Dr. Heidi Shafer, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. It is Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month, and obviously we know this crime happens 365 days a year, but I'm so grateful to the Women's Fund for bringing this forward this month, because certainly this topic is really important. So my name is Heidi Shafer. I'm an internal medicine physician, so I have something in common with Dr. Dreiss. And ironically, I'm also a graduate of U of M School of Medicine, which is, I could see where she taught at some point. So how cool is that? And ironically, I'm also full circle. I've come back home to U of M. I am now teaching at the University of Miami School of Nursing, which is doing some incredible things to really help educate their first responders about human trafficking identification and treatment. So I'm very excited to be part of U of M. I'm also a professor at FAU School of Medicine, and my real niche is human trafficking, trauma, victim-centered approach, those kinds of things that have to do with the topic that we're talking about today. My other degree is in psychology, so when we talk about mental health and the stigma of mental health, I really do believe the mind body go together. You can't have great physical health if you're having mental health issues, and vice versa. So trauma is really central to this discussion. The other thing that I guess I'm sort of known for in this realm is legislation. I definitely work with both federal and state legislators. We've had some very good success with bills that have to do with exploitation and trafficking. And I'm partially responsible for the bill that requires all physicians and anybody in the medical field to get education in order to renew their license. That was something that I had dreamed about, 12 years ago when I learned about this topic as part of the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition. And it's been a labor of love, but I'm glad we were able to finally accomplish that. So the other hats that I've worn, I've been former president of the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Palm Beaches, and I'm on several different boards that have to do with providing direct services or education and prevention regarding this topic. But very happy to be here, and thank you all for joining and listening in.
Somebody who's participated in the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force and multitudinous organizations is the amazing Maria Clara Harrington, who some of you thought you would see today. She has been Omicroned, and we are really thrilled to have her boss, Dr. Jehan Omar. Thank you so much. We've been in the same place at the same time before, but now you're stuck with your Women's Fund. Thank you for being here. Please introduce yourself further. Oops, we've got you on mute. Sorry, doctor.
Oh, I said, thanks so much for having me. And you did great with that, by the way. It really is an honor for me to be around such esteemed colleagues who all kind of share the same passion and dedication to overcoming the impact of trauma. So it really is just a joy to be here. So as she mentioned, I'm Dr. Jehan Omar. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here in South Florida. I've been in practice for about 20 years, and I've been with Citrus for about 18 years of those 20 years, where I really have kind of spent my career dedicated to working in community settings and community mental health, homeless populations, adolescents with severe mental illness, residential children who've been in residential DJJ placements. And currently I am the director of our foster care department and our Chance program. So we serve approximately 150 children in the Dade and Broward communities who are children in child welfare who are in foster care. We operate therapeutic foster homes. We have developed the Chance model, which I hope many of you are familiar with. It is emerging as a promising practice dedicated to really eradicating sexual exploitation as we see it, high prevalence in our population of kids who have been very vulnerable given that their foster care background. So we really are making strides and we continue to grow. We continue to learn from our experiences. And I'm just happy to be able to kind of share some of those experiences with you guys today and see if we can kind of come together and really grow. So thank you again for having me.
You said it very well. That's exactly what we're here for. She's going to introduce herself, but I have to say that Lori is also one of our impact agents of the Women's Fund. So we have a lot of real participants here, part of our volunteer corps, and somebody who's so articulate and an incredible impact agent. So welcome, Lori. Unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you to all of you at the Women's Fund for having me here today. It's really wonderful to be in the company of women who are talking about this issue. It's an issue that we absolutely need to be talking about, and also in the company of women who are treating this issue from a trauma-informed lens and focusing on it and understand it. I, on a professional level, work as a care coordination specialist for Thriving Mind South Florida. I work in our new trauma recovery network, which is based on the Trauma Recovery Center model that's being used very successfully in other parts of the country. We recently received a $2.3 million VOCA grant to implement this program. So it's really, really an exciting opportunity for me to be working with survivors of violent crime, and also to be collaborating with so many different organizations that are already very deeply invested in this work. On a personal level, I have lived experience. This issue is a big part of my life. I started telling my story publicly when I was 22 years old, in how I had survived 13 years of incest. I should have been removed from my home. I felt deeply and was deeply failed by our medical system, by well-intentioned doctors, well-intentioned clinicians, people who cared, but were not addressing my trauma. And when I was 26 years old, I had been sick on and off throughout my life, and finally diagnosed with a very severe neurological condition that 5 years later, at the age of 31, left me in a nursing home unexpected to recover. Today, after many, many years of fortunately getting good medical care and appropriate help, I'm fully recovered. I have had to deal with several different types of other medical issues on occasion. But despite those things, I'm a well person today. I'm grateful for my lived experience and the ability now to support other survivors, and for the advocacy and service work that I've been given this opportunity and really a miracle to be able to do, because I don't want to see others suffer the way that I have. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here with you all and to collaborate with you.
This is your Women's Fund, Lori. This is all of our Women's Fund. Thank you so much. So one thing that Lori mentioned there was the new Thriving Minds program. When you come to an impact collaborative, you're coming to find out what the latest and the greatest is and what's really going on, right? So that's cutting edge new information, and that often happens here. Why does it happen here? Because we bring experts like these together and we share, and we ask each of our experts to tell us what they think is important. We're not asking the same set of questions. We ask them to tell us what's going on. That's what this next segment is. So in 3 minutes or less, what are you seeing in the real world in your practices? What do we need to know? Millie Maldonado, take it away.
In our practices, or at TRC specifically, we see individuals that come in, and one of the most important things that we obviously try to educate clients is change the stigma of mental health, especially when they come in with wrong information from others, from you're crazy, there's nothing wrong with you, you're being dramatic. And it's pretty much to explain to them that validate their experience, validate what happened to them, and know that it did happen and that they were impacted. Another thing that we educate individuals is, and this comes also from professionals, where they invalidate their experience as being traumatic because it doesn't fit in a specific diagnosis. One of the things that we remind individuals is that we are not just to put in a box. We are all different. And trauma or stressful experiences, they impact us in a very different way. So we change the way that we talk about trauma. We call it traumatic injury. We call it stress injury. So we educate, and that's one of the things that we do at our agency, and that we see that it becomes, it changes. Our clients come in and they receive psychoeducation, not only on the psychobiology of trauma, but also cycle of violence, the effects of trauma on children, and trauma bonding. Why do we stay with individuals that actually hurt us? Why? Others don't understand that. And they actually, even friends, begin not to, they begin to alienate from these individuals because they think that they're being masochists. So when we teach them about or educate them about these situations, they begin to shift. Now they're open to receiving the services that we provide, which is individual, holistic approach to trauma. We hear their story. We provide a safe space. We let them know that there's no judgment. And us as practitioners, one of the things that we have to do to work at TRC is to work on our own trauma so that we don't interject what happened to us on the individual story. We provide the holistic approach. So again, not only individual, but also massage therapy, acupuncture, because we know that when something happens to us, it affects us as a whole. And
So important for all of us. So important for all of us to know, whether we're a provider or we're a regular member of the community, we need to understand it and the amazing services that are here. We'll talk about in a moment. Dr. Shafer.
Hi. Okay, so can we bring up my slides? I'm going to try to do this in 3 minutes or less. I can talk about this for like 14 hours straight. I'm sure some of you have had the pleasure or displeasure of hearing me talk about this, but this is very important, and trauma in general is just something that we don't really think about enough. And I'm so glad that Women's Fund is bringing this to the forefront. So what I wanted to show is a couple slides that kind of validate what we're saying, what we're seeing in real life, but also studies, because I am a scientist. I think it's important to show some data. This is a study that basically, in essence, says these people that have trafficking, because that's kind of my niche, that they have experience with trauma before, during, and after their captivity, which makes sense. And Lori, I'm really sorry that the doctors failed you. Part of my mission is to educate fellow clinicians, because we're seeing these patients. We don't even know we're seeing these types of patients, and we should do better. So as you can see, there's early onset trauma. Most victims, if you talk to them, especially sex trafficking victims, 80 to 90% will admit to having child sexual abuse. And we're failing to ask those very important questions. Then they go through the abuse during their captivity. And then finally, if we're lucky enough to help them realize there's another path and give them the support. It's one thing to promise our patients that there's another way out, but if we're not offering services and having all these wonderful wraparound providers, some of which are on this call, we're selling them a lie. So by the time they get out, a lot of them unfortunately don't have any experience with healthy relationships. They don't know about boundaries. They are in this hypervigilant state that was talked about earlier, in a state of arousal where they're just paranoid about the world because they should be. Nobody's done right by them yet. So unfortunately, it's this endless cycle. And so we have to break the cycle at all of these levels. But hopefully we can start out with number one, which is getting to them before they've been hurt again. So prevention is really important, which is what I focus a lot on, especially now that I'm educating more than actual practicing. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a mental health. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but basically I just wanted to show you that, we talk about well-being. You can't talk about well-being without the mental health side. Certainly you could see that if you compare it to control groups, the levels of anxiety, depression, and PTSD are through the roof in these types of patients. So we need to do better. Next slide. This I put in here because we are the Women's Fund. I'm not at all saying that trafficking and trauma doesn't happen to boys. As a matter of fact, labor trafficking happens more to men and males. So we sometimes fail to really give, even in legislation, it's Violence Against Women's Act. We really leave out our male counterparts, and that's unfortunate. Also our transgender population. So we need to do better. But this one specifically has to do with the health of trafficked women. And I thought was interesting is if you go to that second paragraph where it says 63% presented with 10 or more concurrent physical health problems. These patients are presenting with a ton of different issues. The fact that we're not putting it together and taking that constellation of symptoms and saying this is trafficking is really not okay in today's day and age. When I trained back in the dinosaur ages, I don't know how old Dr. Dreiss is, but I trained back in the 90s and we didn't talk about human trafficking. We didn't get that in residency or medical school. And I went to a top medical school. So it just wasn't discussed. The TVPA came out in 2001. So now that we have information, it's sort of become incumbent upon me to make sure all my clinician friends learn about this, but we have to do better. As you can see, PTSD is on that list, suicidal ideation. The other thing is memory difficulties. We overlook this, but a lot of people think these patients are just not cooperative. I know we have some legal people on watching as well from Catherine Fernandez Rundle's office, which they do a tremendous job. And we think these people are just combative and not cooperating with authority. But the truth is a lot of them truly have a memory defect because of repeated trauma to the head. Some of them have been strangled and asphyxiated during sex acts. A lot of these victims are forced to reenact things that people are watching on pornos, which by the way are 99.9% of the time non-consensual. So you have human trafficking victims online, then they act it out in life. And so these patients aren't getting good oxygenation in the brain. So they literally have damage to their brain. But more importantly, from the psychological side, because again, my other degree is in psychology, we have a defense mechanism that a lot of us who experience trauma, including myself, we can dissociate. We can honestly not remember periods of our life because that's how our brain operates to keep us functional. So, please be kind to your patients, or if you're not a practitioner, somebody who's trying to tell their story, not only start by believing, but give them the opportunity to speak. And if you feel like they're holding back, it could be that they physically can't remember what's happened to them, or psychologically it's just too painful. Let's go to the last slide. One more slide, please. Oh, well, there it is. Okay, I'm not going to get into all this. I just want you guys to have a reference, but you can see that this study definitely shows both the psychological and physical harm. So many different things I can talk about, but the bottom line is trauma is not good for the body. It's not good for your brain. And we just have to really meet these patients where they're at, be kind and be a resource, meet them where they're at. And I assure you that over time, that rapport will pay dividends and they will eventually have that seed planted that someone cares. And it should start with medical professionals, in my opinion, but everybody has a role in this. And that's all I have for my 3 minutes.
Amazing. There is always something we can do. There's always something we can do. Dr. Omar.
Hi. Okay. So, to really piggyback on Dr. Shafer, we primarily, as I said earlier, work with the adolescent population who are extremely vulnerable, right? Because they have been in child welfare and they are identified victims or at-risk victims of human trafficking, sexual exploitation. So what we are seeing is that these, and in our particular population and in the greater population, is that these children have experienced, as Dr. Shafer said, multiple forms of trauma and adverse childhood experiences, much greater than even the criminal population. And so we know that they're at high vulnerability. Moreover, we know that adolescent population then is also disproportionately represented in intimate partner violence. So this is a really pivotal age for what we're seeing, because this is an opportunity for us to really kind of work with them and try to kind of develop those relationships and use that teamwork and trauma-informed approach to really stop or kind of slow down the impact, then the long-term impact of trauma. Because once we see that they are more likely to engage in the high-risk behaviors, more likely to be school dropouts, teen pregnancies, chronic sexual transmitted diseases. And so how we're trying to kind of really engage them is both at the clinical programmatic policy level in terms of helping them develop healthier coping skills, helping them kind of see what a healthy relationship looks like, helping them identify their self-worth, have that self-love, but then even simple things like, financial stability so that they aren't kind of put in those situations where they rely on a partner who is harmful and dangerous to them. We're seeing the parallels of intimate partner violence in terms of the power and control relationship, similar to the human trafficking population. So it really is both the parallel of the relationships, intimate partner violence and victims of sexual exploitation, but then they also, one leads to the other or happens concurrently. So if we can kind of get them to recognize that these are the things that they can overcome, we've been able to be successful. So we've been really trying to emphasize developing that one-on-one relationship with their therapist, with the team, so that we can kind of balance the scales or tip the scales in favor of them having safe people who are trauma informed, people who look out for their best interests, so that they can kind of overcome and avoid some of these future hardships. I mean, I could talk all day as well, but we definitely see this as the age that is really pivotal. And if we can get them now at this point and really kind of help them, then we can kind of really avoid some of those long-term chronic effects that we're seeing. So thanks. I got that 3 minutes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Don't worry, we'll be back. Lori.
There are so many good things that I think were already said. I'll piggyback on a little bit. I think one thing that is important is that we are not focusing much on psychosocial education. We're not teaching people how to recognize trauma. We're not helping people even understand what it means to have a dysregulated nervous system or to recognize that in other people. And you don't have to be a clinician in order to learn these things, to be curious about these things, to want to understand these things, and to then want to support other people in your life who are dealing with trauma. I think, in our society, we teach people you have to be happy all the time, you have to be positive all the time. And if you're not, then there's something wrong with you. You're doing something wrong. You're going to cause harm to other people. That is very, very problematic because it teaches people that it's not safe to be able to talk about what you've experienced. I think also there are certain types of loss and certain types of trauma that people will respond to favorably. If you lose a child, people are going to be supportive. Sometimes if you're diagnosed with a serious medical condition, people are supportive, but they don't stick around too long. There's different things like that. If you go through a divorce, people are supportive, but things like a sexual assault or domestic violence or someone who's being trafficked, people get very, very anxious. They often withdraw. And it's because we're not teaching people how to deal with pain, with loss, with grief, with trauma. We're teaching people that again, you have to be happy all the time. And that's pseudo happy, of course, that teaches people really to become numb. And then we wonder why we have other problems with addiction in our society that are rampant in different forms, right? So I think that's one piece of it. I also would, I guess, like to add a little bit to what Dr. Dreiss and Dr. Shafer had also mentioned earlier about the medical profession. I want to see people like them treating patients and treating clients. I want to see the Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris's of the world, who of course revamped all of the research on ACEs. ACE research is not new. It was largely ignored. And then it was brought to life again. Of course, she wrote The Deepest Well. She's done a TED Talk. These are things that everyday people can learn about and can really become more supportive individuals if they are knowledgeable about. And this is how I think we stop that perpetual cycle of people just, their bodies continuing to harm them over and over and over again, and not getting the type of care and treatment and support from others in our community that they need.
Rich.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to comment on the slide a little bit about my story and what happened. The picture on the left is a picture of me when I was 2 years old. The picture on the right is a picture of me when I was 6 years old. And I look like that, you know, cute, happy kid, like every 2-year-old and every 6-year-old. But what was going on here? There were lots of people in my life who I know for sure knew that I was being abused in different ways in the home. Before the picture on the left of age 2 was taken, I'd already been hospitalized. And as an adult in the late 90s, I went and looked into what happened to me. There is absolutely no reason why a child would be hospitalized for the reasons that I was, and for all of these different problems that were documented at the age of 6 months. Later, then go on and be sexually abused until age 13. At age 6, same thing. This had then gone on for at least 5.5 years. Absolutely no intervention. But what do we see? We see the mask, we see the happy, excuse me, we see all the things that we're taught are appropriate to see. We see all the things that we want to see in children, but they're not telling the whole story. And that's why it's important that we talk about this, that we be informed about this. This is a picture many years later. August of 2020, I end up in an emergency room because of a problem related to allergies that caused a bad headache. And I find out that I was having a migraine headache that resulted from allergies, but I also had a brain aneurysm. I had no risk factors for this other than being a female. I have no family history of this to my knowledge. We are estranged, and that is what's best for me. But to the best of my knowledge, there's no aneurysms. They found a single aneurysm that they told me would have taken out my left eye had it ruptured. And I was admitted to the hospital and taken to surgery. This is a picture of one of my procedures to ensure that my stent and coil are working well. Fortunately, they are. And I'm recovering. And the proclamation next to that photo from 2020 was a proclamation that was issued here in Florida by my senator and friend, Senator Jason Pizzo, to help us raise awareness about the issue of brain aneurysms. I also volunteer with the Brain Aneurysm Foundation so that I can support other survivors, some of whom had ruptures and had a much more challenging journey than I did, until we can ensure that scans are made available. And we are working on that. It's called Ellie's Law. And this is part of now my healthcare advocacy, but it all ties back to this issue of violence and what we can do to get it when it happens, so that we can serve our women and support our women, and be that change that we talk about.
All right, talk about power of stories, and people wanting to want you all to know that we never ask anybody who's invited to speak in an impact collaborative to share anything they don't want to share. Lori is an incredible leader in our community for so many reasons, and we thank you. And one of the reasons that we thank you is because you're going to help us with this next part of giving people a fishing pole. We never talk about only what we need to know unless we know what we can do, right? And there is always something that we as a community can do, because we're in an amazing community called Miami-Dade County, and Your Women's Fund has connections to all these amazing experts here. We have resources on our website for domestic violence, for human trafficking. We have on our research site, we have 140 organizations that serve women and girls in our community. And I'm going to ask our team to share that. There is always something you can do. And later on the Q&A, we want to get some tips from our experts here about ways to help keeping your energy up when you're trying to help somebody and they're not ready. So prepare for that question, all of you, please. Right now, I'm going to ask you all in those 3 minutes or less to give us some calls to action and tools. What can we do? Ms. Maldonado, take it away.
Thank you. So what can we do as a community, as professionals? One of the things I can say is know your resources, know your network, right? A lot of the times I find that the best resources are next, our colleagues, our peers, and knowing where to send an individual, where to refer an individual for either mental health, for other resources. It's really important, and that's how you can start. As a community also, and something that was mentioned is education. Educate yourself and others on the impact of trauma, of violence, and share your story. I think it's so wonderful when we ourselves talk about our personal, what has happened to us, or were we in a network or a panel where we learned this, and this is probably is going to help you. And let's talk about the impact of trauma and how trauma looks in different ways to different people. So information, collaboration, and just you don't have to be a clinician to actually create that safe space for an individual so that they don't feel judged. One of the things that I know that happens to all of us is that when we don't know, we try to give advice, right? Or maybe interrupt the individual when they're telling you a story of what happened. You all of a sudden you're telling them what happened to you, or what they should or they shouldn't say or act. When in fact we can all start by listening, non-judgmental listening. Just listen to a friend, listen to an individual, listen to your patients of what they have been through. We may not know all the stories or how to help, but by listening and not reacting is the first impact that you can do for an individual. And as clinicians, we are taught to listen, right? To be great empathetic individuals, especially mental health clinicians. So we know we got that, but a wonder is how many times we go in already with an agenda. We know a client that have experienced trauma, so we already have our treatment goal. What are we gonna do? When in fact, the best thing that you can do at the beginning is really pretty much listen to the individual without any agenda. Create that safe space for the individual that you're treating. Create that safe space for the friend that you're listening to. Create that network for that friend, for that family member. Being active in the community by just being present in collaborations such as this one. We all learn and we can connect each other to other networks, to other agencies. And I think that's really important. I'm all about networking. I'm all about community. I believe that I cannot do it alone. The Trauma Resolution Center, we have great resources, but there are times when we have to reach out. We have to reach out to other partners. And those resources and those tools are part of what helps an individual process trauma and heal. So yes, that's, I think, one of the most basic things that we can do as professionals, as partners, and just as human beings. When we talk about trauma-informed care, I like to also say that it's also human-informed care. We're all human beings, and we are here for a reason. And that could be to impact one another, to help, and to show empathy, not only by just presenting ourselves and just showing what we know, but also listening and reaching out to help. That's all I can say. I mean, I can continue, but I don't know if I have.
So powerful in itself, so powerful. Well, everybody's taking that with them. That's the truth. Dr. Shafer.
Okay, so solutions. I guess we'll go to my slides to keep me at a certain time limit. This is the slide that I typically use when I close out a medical presentation, but it's sort of like the summary of like, what can a professional do? And a lot of these things have already been covered, so it's great. One of the things was obvious about getting the potential victim away from their perpetrator, which unfortunately accompany them into the ERs, into the hospital wards. I've had to make every excuse under the sun to get them out. Obviously, if I'm doing a rectal or vaginal exam, then that makes complete sense anyway. But the truth is, the second part is kind of the overriding theme today. It's just build that no judgment zone. You know, build a rapport, let them know that you're here. If they come in and they're talking about being microchipped, don't automatically call a psych consult. They might not be crazy. It could be that they are actually being tracked by their pimps. We've seen this. If they're being forced to use drugs, don't just think they're drug seeking and kick them out of your ER. You know, if they're talking about familial victimization, I'm glad that Lori's talking about incest. We know that most people that hurt children are known to they're known to the children. It's oftentimes their own parents, their relatives, a coach, a teacher. These are all people that have access to your children. So for those of you that aren't in the medical profession, or someone like me that has a 14-year-old son, it is our responsibility to educate our kids. Do a lot of role play. What would happen if this happened to you? How would you react? I'm part of Kids Safe Foundation, which has prevention education all the way from pre-K through 5th grade. So we get into the earliest stages and people say, well, that's too early to talk about this kind of stuff. Well, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of vaginas and penises, but we are going to talk about anything under your bathing suit, including for boys, their backside. That is protected area, and people should have to ask your permission. That your body is yours and it belongs only to you, not even to your parents, not even to the doctors. You know, I think about the fact that, you know, parents give carte blanche to physicians. There are some wonderful physicians, but we've had a couple cases. Even people in my own medical field have betrayed the trust of these children. So let's be advocates for kids. It's just really important that we don't automatically rule out that there's familial abuse or that there's forced drug use. It helps them be more compliant. A human trafficking victim that's forced to sleep with 25 disgusting, violent people a day. You know, wouldn't you rather be under the influence if you had to endure that? Wouldn't you rather jump off the nearest bridge? I mean, we have to really take ourselves out of what we think we would do, because until you're in that situation, you have no idea how you deal with all that repeated trauma. It talks about translators. A lot of them pretend that they can't speak any English. So use a bona fide translator, not the pimp right next to them. Call the hotline. We'll go to the next slide, which is basically the hotline number, if nothing else. I tell people on the next slide, please, to please memorize 888-37-37-888, 888-37-37-888. That's the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Everybody should have that memorized because it's so easy, or put it in your phone for those of us relying on our cell phones these days. But I make, I don't know how many calls to Polaris a year. I also have some trusted, amazing agents at the FBI that I'll send cases to because I think that they do a great job following up. The South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force and I have been working together for a long time, so I will send them tips. But the reality is you don't have to be a medical professional to make a call. If you see something strange in a McDonald's, which is the #1 place that sex trafficking victims are brought to for dinner or lunch, and they're so grateful just to have a hamburger, you know, you can make that call and say, you know, I saw this older looking guy with someone who clearly doesn't look like he belongs with this very young, scantily clad girl. And I just felt that there was tension. You know, if you can get a picture of a tattoo, or you could, you know, look at the license plate. You don't have to be a detective. That's why we have law enforcement officers. But the more information you can give to Polaris, the more helpful. And it's not on the slide, but also all of you have elected officials. You put them to represent you in office to hopefully, you know, promote the issues that you care about. It's important for you to get to know them, to tell them that human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual abuse, these are issues that they should be putting forward in Congress and in the Senate. So interestingly, Jason Pizzo, which we heard this name earlier, Lori, he is the chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee in the Senate here in Florida. And we have a bill that's being brought forth right now. And Robin Bartleman is the House side. But we do think that Jason might be a little bit of a gatekeeper for this bill at the Senate. So I encourage everybody who's interested. It's Senate Bill 1084. If you can call Jason's office and encourage him to please let this be heard, pass it through committee. His number is 305-795-1205. This bill has to do with rape victims. A lot of my bills are not just human trafficking specifically, but anything to do with rape, sexual exploitation. We passed a great bill called Serena's Law last session that has to do with perpetrators that have injunctions brought against them for raping a child. But because we want to protect the child's identity, we haven't made those injunctions public. So then when you research this guy or gal, whoever's abusing these children, they kind of get a free pass because they're not normally found out the way that you would if you would go through a whole criminal proceeding. And so we changed that law, and Serena, who's a real victim in Naples, was pushing this for 3 years, and it was brought to my attention, and we got it through last year, and the governor signed it into law, which will now make injunctions public, so that these guys can't just go from one school to another, or in this case, he wanted to be like a youth pastor at a church after he'd already raped this little girl. So we can do better, but if you can call Jason and tell him you want him to pass 1084, this has to do with campus rape. Every single college across our great state, I don't care where you, even U of M, all the wonderful universities, don't kid yourself, it's happening on campus. And it basically prevents the universities from retribution and kind of threatening and intimidating these victims from reporting their crime. And it's really important. So anyway, thank you. I went over 3 minutes, but these are
Heidi, can you share that the phone number, and any of that information that you share, if you can share it in the chat. One of our board members, Dan Conley Graham, has already responded there. Dan's on our legislative and advocacy committee, and Tish Mindingal, who's also here in the audience, is joining that committee. So that there are other folks there who will definitely act. I also wanted to mention, speaking of Tish, who, works with No More Broken Hearts as well, and Dr. Dorothy Bendros Mindingal, one of our great leaders on the school board, has been absolutely instrumental. You talked about government. It's also, our public schools, how incredibly essential it is to have vocal leaders who don't stop until the violence stops, right? So we thank Dr. Dorothy Bendros Mindingal and others, and all of you. It's a phone call, stronger together. So many of you said amazing things. Let's go on. Dr. Omar, please take it away, and then we'll come back to questions after.
Thanks. I think it's important to kind of consider our solutions at multiple levels. And I think, some of the earlier, presenters mentioned that, at the policymaker level, where, we advocate, we lobby for more attention to programs and issues like this, more funding for programs and issues like this, at the programmatic levels, where, a framework of, being able to provide trainings to the communities, that opportunity for staff to be trained, and just early identification, right? And then having this kind of multidisciplinary settings where we found to be very successful in working with them, working with these populations. At the provider or individual level, using training and early identification, but then also helping, our children and our clients, teaching them healthy coping skills, promoting healthy relationships, psychoeducation about their body and wellness. So many of them, just even at older ages, 16 and 17, what we're seeing, have such little knowledge about healthy physical functioning. And just being that kind of consistent person for them. We found that. And so that's often very hard in our settings to do as mental health providers. They leave, they go to a different program, they go to a different agency, and then they have to stop, and then they have to start over with a new provider. And they develop a thick skin, and they develop a aversion to working with mental health providers about that. And so what we've tried to do is be that constant for them, be that person. They're on run, we're still gonna, keep that case open. We're gonna still try to call them. We're gonna, text them. We're gonna just keep that relationship going so that they know that they have somebody who they can talk to and is still there to support them. So I think there are a lot of different things we could do at different levels. What I've seen effective is situations like this, where we have that opportunity to meet with communities who wouldn't necessarily be aware of some of these issues, to spread the word, to gain awareness. But early identification is key, because we are seeing such high proportions of these type of difficulties in our adolescents, and it's getting younger populations. So
thank you so much for addressing youth. Amazing, amazing. Lori, please.
There's so many important things that were already said. So I'll just briefly add, when it comes to advocacy specifically, I think a big part of the solution is incorporating the voices of people with lived experience, because you want to make sure that policies are actually applicable to survivors' lives. They can inform policy. They can help people understand what it's like in terms of the process of having to heal, about how their lives are affected in different ways by the trauma that are not necessarily so clear in Black and white. We want to make sure our programs work. We want to make sure our laws are just. When it comes to service providers, the same thing. In the program that I'm working in, we incorporate the voices of lived experience in bringing in employees who have lived experience. We have peer specialists. I work in a different capacity, but I also have the lived experience. There's several of us. I know many programs do that. And it's important because, again, we don't know how well things work unless you're actually going through it, unless you've actually lived it. I would say, as well, for people who are survivors, in terms of solutions for you, if you may not have had the kind of care that you needed, know that there are people now that get it, that are implementing the kind of services that you do need, that are implementing the kind of care that you need, that are here to support you, that you don't have to continue in this space where your needs are not getting met, where problems are replicating themselves in your lives, where you feel despondent maybe, or you start to feel hopeless that there's nobody that's ever going to be able to help you or treat you. We are here now. And it's important to remember, I think, for everyone, for survivors, for the general public, that people are whole, that it is circumstances that are broken, and that problems are indeed solvable.
Let these things sink in. There's a lot of richness here. Please do post your questions here, either on the Q&A or in the chat. We'll get to them. We have another poll going up, and please do fill it in, because it does make a difference to us, is how we're able to show the impact of what we do. We also want to share with you that we have this tool. We've given out like 100,000 of these over the years, between 1 Billion Rising, where I started, and the Women's Fund. There's always something you can do. Our board member, Yvonne Mesa, Bureau Chief for the county, is here, and you'll see their phone number for the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center there. Some people want to call law enforcement, which is terrific. 911 is there for you. The state attorney's office is there for you. Some people don't want to call law enforcement. You can call the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center. They're your great, best first stop, and they will coordinate and help. It doesn't have to be about you calling necessarily. Keep this in your car. Somebody will cross your path that needs resources, and this city has them. But without the tentacles of every individual elevating this conversation that you're hearing today to common knowledge, people won't get there. People won't get there. So please. And now we're going to go on to the Q&A. And we are going to start with that first question that I warned about. And I think might have some common knowledge, but some tips, please. Whether it's an individual, well, let's do it this way. When you have somebody in your life, and we all have had or currently do, who's experiencing trauma and is not quite ready to hear it. Millie, you talked about listening, but can you each, give us a tip or two about how we stay engaged and don't become jaded? Who'd like to take it first? I'm going to pick on somebody then. Dr. Omar, what do you say? How can we best help?
Well, I think, I would be remiss if I kind of didn't echo, my earlier sentiments in terms of making sure that that person kind of sees that unconditional positive regard. So like we said, you're right. Sometimes people aren't ready to hear it. If we push too soon, they push back. So we really spend a lot of time trying to kind of develop and role model that healthy relationship, whether it be a friend or a partner or a client, so that they have the safety, the environment that they can start sharing. And from there, then we kind of open the doors where we can then make recommendations, whether it be, seeking counseling, doing some readings, helping them just identify personally healthy coping skills, even simple things like I think Dr. Jenny was saying earlier about, mindfulness. And once they kind of start to recognize those things on their own, then they might feel a little bit more comfortable to kind of take action. So kind of respecting their defenses, but not giving up quickly. And what I see from people and providers, and it's easy to do, is give up quickly, both programmatically. Agencies say, oh, we try 3 times and then we have to close. That's our policy, 30-day discharge. Or friends and family will say, we've tried to talk to her. There's no getting through to her. I have nothing else I can do. But that other person, that negative person is still going to be there because they think that's the only person they can go back to. So we have to compete with that. And we have to kind of ourselves then learn that patience that we're asking them to develop.
Lori, would you share with us your thoughts?
Sure. I would say, I think one of the most important things we really can offer is hope. And that correlates a little bit with what Dr. Omar just mentioned. I can tell you, in my work, in doing social work, I don't give up on anybody. And I know I have 1,000 reasons not to be alive. I have 1,000 reasons not to be here. I can tell you recreating your life is so monumentally difficult, but it is possible. And being able to hear the stories of people who have done this, to connect with others who have helped them, to recognize that there are now a community of people who are actively doing this work, I think it helps people to then find that hope that maybe they haven't seen otherwise, or they've just been told over and over and over again things that were not helpful to them. I think that's another piece of why being able to share stories of people who have lived experience, or let them tell their own story, or even just mention that they exist really, it will give people that hope. Again, circumstances are what are broken. And people can feel, and that is why I tell my story. I want other people to know that they don't have to continue to suffer, and that there is something that can be done against all odds, even in the worst circumstances. I'm writing a book about my story now, and these are things that I want people to know so that they can heal, and they can connect with the right people. And again, many of them are here today. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Lori. Can I ask you, Heidi, one of the things that you brought up, which is an impediment to a lot of people not wanting to leave or not being able to be embracing of somebody's, volunteering support, is also because, and Yvonne Mesa talks about this all the time, finding a safe time to leave and feeling like that might never be. Can you address that issue?
Yeah, I think this is going to be sort of tattling on my colleagues, but I think that doctors and people in healthcare, we want to be the heroes. We want to rescue everybody, and so we have to really check our egos with this type of patient. Actually, with all patients, at the end of the day, patient autonomy is really important. These victims have had zero control of their lives. So if we start putting all these boundaries and trying to restrict them, they're just going to run right back to their pimp, because in some ways we're no better than them. So we have to really allow them to make that their decision. What my goal is always to plant the seed, and it might be on that 5th visit to the ER where they're just sick of it. This time their uterus is completely hanging out of their body. I mean, I'm being graphic, but the truth is, by the time they're brought into care, it's not for like routine things. They're not coming in for like an annual flu shot or I have a headache, doctor. I'd like to find out what's going on. They're coming in because they can no longer produce so many, quotas for their pimps. And so unfortunately, as doctors, we want to kind of figure out what the issue is, get them out, and I'm going to be realistic as an ER physician. I'm dealing with multiple crashing patients on the floor. I got to deal with MIs, and do I have 20 minutes to sit there and try to get it out of a victim that they're a victim of trafficking possibly? no, but I'm going to plant that seed. I'm going to build a rapport and I'm going to let them know I'm here when they're ready. If they want to make that call together to the hotline, I'm here. If they want to take the number, think about it. If at any point it gets so bad and they want to come back in, whatever the excuse that they want to use to get back in the door, we can certainly be there for them and get them into resources. I also make sure they know that I'm not automatically picking up the phone to call law enforcement. And that's no slight against law enforcement. I actually think you have incredible partners, especially in your county in Miami-Dade, phenomenal resources. And I do trust my FBI contact. I do trust people at Homeland Security to really handle both labor and sex trafficking victims, and not pushing for you better cooperate or we're done with you. So let them know that we're here to meet them where they're at, give them that hope. And in terms of like our own perspective, somebody mentioned earlier, it's important for us to deal with our own trauma and not put it on the patient. Realize that, when we are exposed to this repeated trauma ourselves, it does stir up stuff that might have happened to us, and it could ultimately make an impact. So Polaris, these operators, for example, they're answering, I don't know how many phone calls during the course of a day. I know it's exponentially increased over the last couple of years. If you look at their chart of calls coming in, and now including text messages, which has been very successful to get our victims to seek help. I gave them a grant, actually, the operators, to help them deal with that secondary trauma, because they need to take care of themselves too. So it's really important, even what Dr. Dreiss said in the beginning about us, doing meditation or some way to decompress and kind of process. Because there have been days, I'm gonna be honest, where I've gone to bed almost crying, thinking, okay, great, I helped one victim, but by tomorrow that same pimp will have 3 new ones that he met online. And am I making a hill of beans difference? But I believe we all can, and we all do in our own way. And, maybe I saved one girl from trafficking, but I also saved that baby that would eventually be born that would be part of infantile porn. There's a huge industry for that. So we have to all do what we can, but there's always hope. And I think instilling that hope, as somebody said, is really critical, and letting people leave when they're ready. To paint victims as somehow irresponsible because they put up with this abuse. It's the same way we wouldn't want to blame a domestic violence victims. Instead of saying, well, why didn't you leave? We should be thinking, well, why did that guy choose to hit you? Or why did that woman choose to abuse you? Or why did your mother sell you for drugs? We should really be putting the blame where it belongs and not shifting it to our victims who are just struggling to survive day after day. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think that it's really important that we help, first by believing, secondly, by being supportive without any conditions, no conditional love here. We should just, be there for them in whatever way that they're going to show up, even if they're angry and they're mad. It's not personally directed at you, and you just have to understand that as a provider. And then last but not least, let's actually do a call to action if we can help, make that phone call to the Polaris hotline and try to be a resource, at least give them a pamphlet on how to get help with their trauma or their drug use or whatever it is that they might be presenting with.
I'm going to go back to that. Polaris is specifically for human trafficking, and we're going to talk about identifying, right, as well. I did just post the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center. Yvonne Mesa runs that and many other things. They also have text capabilities. We all need to have this in our phones on speed dial. So we're going to come back to that in a second. Dr. Dreiss, please.
Thank you. I just have a brief comment as I'm listening to you and educating myself. I think that as providers, we have an obligation to our patients and to ourselves to stay informed and to know our resources out there. Too many times we feel that we are rushed. We don't have enough time to listen to our patients. But at least we can help them. We can make sure they know that they are heard, and that we're here to listen to them and to refer them to, places where they can get the help they need. So this is why I want to go back and again say with the great emphasis that I think we have an obligation first to ourselves. This is our conscious, and to our patient to remain informed. And I thank you for bringing that to light.
And that's why all of you show up, because this is about, I always say, if I want to find out about the health of the Bay, listen, I read the email blast from Miami Waterkeeper, for news, I go to different sources. When people come to the Women's Fund, they put on their gender lens. We're elevating this community conversation. And Dr. Joyce, you said that as individuals, in addition to as providers, well, that's true, because as individuals, we all have the responsibility, and the stats really would change, maybe not of initial violence, but repeated violence. I have just no question that if we all feel empowered, and this is a powerful group of people who show up for the Women's Fund, when we feel empowered, there is so much that we can do. I want to talk about Millie. A lot of people, you were great saying a lot of people don't really realize that they've had trauma before, right? And if one of the many incredible things I've learned by working with and sharing space with champions, survivor champions, and survivor leaders is that for many years, they didn't think of themselves as a victim. They were living their lives, and that's what life looked like, right? So can you talk a little bit about that as we're trying to help and support others? People don't have to understand that they are being victimized, correct?
Right. And one of the things that we hear a lot is, it's my personality, or this is just the way I am, right? Or that's just, I react that way. And usually wondering, where did that come from, right? How did you learn that behavior? One of the anecdotes or examples I provide to clients or to therapists is I give it to them as a backpack, right? When we are born, we're born with an invisible backpack, and that backpack is we put in our experiences. So we think of great, wonderful experiences in our lives, they tend to feel weightless. If we begin to now start thinking of the stressful experiences in our lives and chronic stress or toxic stress, they feel heavy. And when we are carrying this heavy backpack, we begin to even walk different, react different. When something's very heavy, we get frustrated, fatigued, and but we've had it for such a long time, right, that it just becomes part of who we are. So sometimes we don't really believe that we've gone through trauma or we've been victims, or it's just our culture, or this is how I grew up. But understanding that doesn't mean that it's okay. That doesn't mean that that's your personality. Something happened. Something has happened. You experienced something. And again, all the times we are resilient, and that's great, right? We have tools, we have able to move forward, but that doesn't mean that we didn't experience trauma, that we didn't experience something that impacted us. And most of the times when we go to seek therapy, or we go to the doctor, is because we're already feeling it, or it's impacting our day-to-day. So when we have these clients, or when we speak to individuals, obviously not invalidating their story, but actually listening and giving them some education, because if you don't know, you don't know. And you just go through life just figuring out that this is who you are. And then you get these wrong indications from individuals, like you're crazy, or you're impossible, or this is the reason why nobody talks to you or nobody likes you. And again, you're creating these beliefs about yourself. So I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but more than anything is education, is figuring out that if it doesn't feel okay, then it's not okay. And then if you want to seek changes, then there are individuals and there are agencies and ways in way you can change. Our most powerful way of changing is also taking time to get to know ourselves and how we react through breathing techniques, mindfulness, right? Getting to know how we're able to relax ourselves, to be in that present moment, to then realize, okay, this is what I need to do for myself in order to change something that's not working for me. You want to call it trauma, you want to call it stress, you want to call it personality, call it whatever is okay for you to call. But if it's not working for you, then there is ways changing it.
There's some great resources being posted in the chat as well. Please, anybody, in the last few minutes that we have here, please do feel free to post your resources. Some of you will be getting directly contacted panelists by members of our audience who have asked in the poll to connect with you directly. One of the things that we say here is that with every thread that gets woven together, every connection that's made, we build a stronger and more resilient fabric of this community. And that is so true. I mean, I don't know what I would do without citrus. Citrus is there for us all day long, every day. And that's true. What would we do without, what Thriving Minds does, what the Trauma Resilient. I have a problem, Millie, with Trauma Resolution Center, that you are all so busy and so popular. I think that you need to clone yourselves. And I think Trauma Resolution Center needs to be funded and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So talk about calls to action and things to do. Heidi, you don't have to know the numbers, but can you join me in this conversation for just a couple seconds of people who aren't like this tribe here, who's really interested in this topic? How do we get different people to listen? Because that's one of the points of talking this conversation today. Some people say, well, she doesn't want to leave. I saw her get a black eye. I told her she could come to my house. She didn't leave, whatever. So it doesn't really matter. How do we help convince other people? It's expensive, right? If people are getting diabetes later in life or heart conditions, what are some of these arguments that you use maybe with our politicians and others when people need to pay attention to trauma?
It's true. I have a lot of those conversations with politicians because these kinds of bills, for example, aren't very attractive. They don't, necessarily guarantee you're going to get money from Big Sugar and some of these other bills that kind of come with a certain amount of voters, a certain amount of money. I'm just being really candid here. I think the argument I use is, and it's been difficult for me, but I have come to the conclusion that everybody is vulnerable to these types of issues, and including myself. And I won't get too much into my story, but I'm very glad that Lori has shared her story today. What I will say is that I'm a victim of, or survivor of domestic violence, and yet I'm an expert in the field. I train on how to not be a victim of domestic violence, and the reality is human trafficking or these forms of trauma and violence, including sexual assault, everybody is vulnerable. We all think that it'll never happen to us, that we're too educated or we're too wealthy or we don't fit the demographic. And I kind of explained to the politicians that this isn't like this isn't like one specific profile. It's not only, when we think about victims and perpetrators, they come from all walks of life. We think, oh, that high school dropout, he's never going to amount to anything, but he's probably your pimp making $250,000 per kid. And the average pimp has like six kids working for him. So that guy's making more money than any of us will ever make, because it's all about the Benjamins. They could care less about these victims. So the reality is, what I try to explain to people, I can give you the legal definition of human trafficking, but it really amounts to exploiting a vulnerability. And we all think we don't have one, but we all do. If you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have your basic needs at the bottom: safety, food, shelter. So your runaway kids, for example, are very high risk because they leave with nothing. What are you going to do at age 11 to support yourself? Let's just be honest. But even people my age are online right now looking for love. I can tell you some of them are actively being groomed by a pimp, and they're not seeing it. And it starts out the same way as a romantic lover, as a domestic violence perpetrator, where they're that Romeo pimp stage, and then they advance into that gorilla pimp when they want to be paid back for all their food and housing and bringing them to McDonald's and getting them a weave and getting their nails done, which, by the way, isn't done because they care about the girl or the kid. It's because they basically want to make them attractive so they can make more money off of them, literally off their backs, 25 times a day, with disgusting, horrible people that are raping and abusing these victims. So the reality is, my argument might be it should be, I guess, and it should appeal to everybody, even if we don't think that this will ever happen to us, to really awaken that, like what we call in psychology, reality testing, letting people know that you think you might never be victimized. But I guarantee you, if it's not you, someone you know has been, someone you know could be. It could be, as terrible as it sounds, it could be your own child if you don't take steps to let him or her know that this is a possibility, that this is how we have to protect ourselves, that listening to blind authority across the board is not right. And we do train our kids at a young age, be respectful. You know, Aunt Madge wants a hug. Well, if your child doesn't want to hug that aunt, listen to that child.
Yeah.
Hey, okay, well, do you want to do a fist bump? You know, something where you're still respectful. But it starts with societal changes of not allowing kids just to blindly follow authority. If their coach is saying, come in the back room after practice, you know, that child should have a voice. And so I really think there's so many things we can do, but it starts with really educating everybody, including our politicians, that you think that this doesn't affect you. It doesn't affect your constituents, but it certainly does. And then of course you can give them a gazillion stats, which we can all pull up off the Polaris site to show how prevalent it is. But I really think it comes down to this understanding that we all can be, we all
got some powerful voices here, and I'm seeing a bunch of names I know here. People are here to act for sure. That's why we come together. That's why the first Thursday of every month, it's important to come together. This is your Women's Fund. Experts like these are amazing. So they're proof that there's always something that we can do. Viv, Camila, amazing Camila, who works with us. Join Lori Scott and us and be, you know, one of our volunteers. I mean, it doesn't, you know, the Women's Fund is the entire community. You don't have to be a member to do it. If you want to really be in touch every month and talk about what we can do, these community conversations bring people together, join us. That's our volunteer core. And people who fuel us, it's amazing. These are people who have the capacity to, you know, fuel our grand mission. And you can scan here if you're one of those people who's financially capable of fueling us, so we can keep this truck rolling. And onwards to our little last, you know, petition for your feedback today. As soon as we get off this, you're going to go to your inbox and you're going to be busy. It's going to be full, but there's just a couple minutes in that exit survey that helps us to keep on top of things. We'll be here the first Thursday of February with a really interesting one. Who's not interested in the tech boom? Who's not interested in economic mobility for women, right? So we got some really incredible people who are going to be here as panelists. So panelists, come and be part of the audience next time. Audience, I'll come back now and keep on impacting and making a difference. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Jihan, amazing now to really know you. Please, let's keep it up, right?
Definitely.
And Maria Clara, we love it. Very helpful.
Maria Clara and I are a package deal.
Fantastic. Well, it's good you got each other's backs. Don't you get sick now?
Oh, please don't say that. You don't know how neurotic I am.
Might be helpful in this case, right?
It's made you very attuned to your body. I can tell you that these past couple of years. So
amazing. Well, this will be rendered and put up on our website. So by tomorrow afternoon, it will be up. It's not plagiarism. It's feel free to use it. If you said something that you want to show when you're doing a presentation to another group, if Millie said something that you want to quote, I mean, go ahead. Please do use all of these tools. This is why we do it. And we need to go to people where they are. So some people come to the Women's Fund, some people are clients of Citrus, some people are part of the Human Trafficking Task Force, and some are first year nursing students, right? You know, a lot of people in the, you know, who have learned from you, Dr. Dreiss, and, you know, a lot of these folks who you've trained across the years might not have come on their radar, right?
Maria, I know there's a few people left, but if I could add, I know that
Please,
we didn't
yes.
really talk about this, touch on this, but since we work with children in foster care, it's really important that we have foster parents who really care, foster parents who are good role models, foster parents who can kind of replace those unhealthy relationships with role modeling positive relationships. And the only way we do that, again, is through community awareness and teaching parents and seeing who wants to kind of open up their home. Just one kid, but you'd be surprised that people really have found that this is a passion for them, that they are really good at this. And all we can do is spread the word. The more foster parents we have, not just in Dade and Broward, in the state, in the country, in the world, the more we have, the more options we have for our kids, the more opportunities we have to find matches for them that are culturally appropriate, that are patient and are willing to work with them, that we can train right now, because the country has far too few foster homes, and people volunteer to do it. That's one of the things where we continue to find problems for the kids and the frequent transitions and just another trauma for them. So if the more foster parents we have, the better outcomes we have for the kids. So if anybody's interested or knows somebody who wants to be a foster parent, talk to me. We do therapeutic foster care, but there's regular foster care too. And there's a lot of amazing kids. There's foster to adopt. There's just so many opportunities. And some parents just do something called respite, which, they just kind of become foster parents just to take kids for a week or two. And so there's just a lot of options. But what we're looking for is just good people who are willing to kind of, give it an extra step to help our future. So,
Jihan, we have had, one is still on. We have had a lot of powerful people in here today, but two of them have podcasts, really good podcasts, and both of them are huge connectors. So we, may speak with, one of them and, over time, and I'm sure they're scheduled but I know that this is an evergreen need, right?
yes.
So even if they're booked up and scheduled for these, upcoming months with their speakers, it's very likely that we circle back with you and ask.
Yeah, I would definitely love to. And I know I speak for MC and that she would too. Everywhere we go, we bring it up. So you don't have to be a foster parent with us, just with someone. And so if we can help you link to any agency, any program, we've done our good deed too. So, it is for the benefit of the children and then for our ultimate future, as a society. So, we're really dedicated to that cause.
You got me thinking. I'm thinking of other things too. Vivi, Kami, Meg, we'll talk about this. Yeah, other things we can do. Nessa.
Thanks for letting me say that. So
No. Thank you. Lori. We can't wait to hear more about the Thriving Mind program and your work. Thank you for being such an important voice.
So much for the opportunity to be here.
And who knew that Heidi and Jenny and Lori were all going to be humans in addition to incredible professionals. Thanks for, intimating to your life's experiences and whatever, because it makes everybody feel seen. If you're not alone, you're with all these, badass other humans, right?
No.
Makes it easier to live.
I don't know if you can hear me,
Yes.
Maria, because I lost the screen. I'm not good with technology, but I want to say a special thank you to you for reaching out and allowing me to talk about my recent plight. And I feel good today having done that. And I learned so much from all of you. It's going to give me something to do. I'm already looking forward to educating myself and reading more. And we'll talk, Maria. I'd love to help as much as I can with Women's Fund. You can count on me. I want you to know that.
Yay! It's a perfect day. One of the things one of the questions I had that we didn't get to, we had done, and Heidi, I know you were on this one, I don't know if it was 4 months ago, but we were talking about the neurobiology of trauma, right? And one of the, it's important to understand not only how it affects memory, why people can't leave, and those things that are external, like why it ticks us off that we just can't fix this stuff, right? But one of the really interesting things I thought about that session was the capacity of rebuilding neural pathways, creating new ones. So as neural pathways are, damaged or connected or trauma to incapacitate people, there is a neuroplasticity, a way of coming back. And that's really exciting. And I'm sure there's just so much, like next year, there's going to be so much more, and the next that we can all learn and share. And that's a really fascinating place, Jenny.
Indeed.
Looking at is how do we rebuild or build brand new pipelines?
Very good. Taking note.
That impact collaborative, all of the impact collaboratives from the past are on our website. There's a tab in the menu that says impact collaboratives. You need to just go back through, and it says the neuroscience of, and there might be a few little gems in there that might spark that investigative academic brain that you have.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I wish you a wonderful, productive day, and that these conversations become common knowledge. Let's keep up the good collective work.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Gami.